All right, folks, welcome to another photo critique from Digital Photo Rec. I'm Toby,
And I'm Christina.
and we asked you all to do something a little bit different for this setup as a way to kind of thank those who are participating in both the Flickr community and my Facebook community. I asked people to post a comment with a link to the picture that they wanted critiqued this week in the Digital Photo Rec group. Now I feel like this was one of those kind of trick questions because some of you just pulled images from your page. I want the ones that were already in the Photo Rec group that were waiting to be critiqued. Got a little more than I thought we were going to. And so we have quite a few here. We are not going to get through all of them in this sitting. I just hit start on the timer for 30 minutes because that's our goal, and we're just going to start rolling through these. On some of them I'll say stuff, on some Christina will say stuff, and on some we'll both say stuff. And we're kicking it off tonight with Paul Best. I think this is a nice image. I think the black and white works well here because it's a very busy image, and if it was color it would be even busier. But there are a couple of things that I think could make this a little bit stronger, a little bit more contrast, add a little bit of punch to this. And this gentleman here, I don't know if he was with you or not, or if he was just hanging out on the bridge as well. If you could have stepped to the left a little bit and framed him in the space more, as it is he's starting to intersect with that tree a little bit. And you'll hear, there are certain themes that I think Christina and I both come back to about composition, and intersection is one of them. And framing, those two things working together. So in this case, I think he could have been framed a little bit more in that leading space down the pathway. And I also would have liked to see those vehicles just a little bit closer, kind of coming onto the bridge. They're just far enough away that between those two things, it's hard to decide what the subject is for sure, or if it is just the space. But overall, I think it's a nice image. So we're going to move on to the next one from Summit. Christina?
So this is a really cool reflection image. I'd say the cropping's pretty interesting. I don't think it's any of the standard aspect ratios. And I like it because it's almost exactly symmetrical. You can see that every bit of the opera house in the reflection is included as well in the, real image. So really nice. I like, the tones, and great dynamic range, even though the opera house is white and sunlit, and everybody else is in the shade. So I really like what you did with the reflection, and I really love the crop. I think there's a perfect amount of foreground and background, and yeah, just really nice overall image. I don't think I would change anything.
I think it's great. I would just say, I wonder, could have you gotten a little bit more space in the reflection?
I think you're being too picky.
Okay. But otherwise, I think it's a great image. Thank you, Summit, or Sumit. Bungle 2012, the Tower Bridge at night. Here we have a very iconic scene lit up at night. It looks good. The exposure is really nice here. We haven't been pulling up the metadata on some of these. I do wish that it was either cropped more so it was just the center section, or a little bit wider. You're as wide as you could go, so that we could capture that other kind of gatehouse that's over there on the right that we're seeing on the left. But otherwise, I think this is a nice shot, and maybe being picky, we could have gone right down to the water's edge,
Yeah.
and gotten less of this here in the foreground.
That would be my suggestion, I think.
It doesn't add anything at all to the image.
It's actually quite a distracting element in the photo, because you see that everything else just kind of blends in, and very distinct geometric patterns like a triangle are very, very huge distractors for people, because that's what our eyes gravitate to, just very distinct patterns like that, especially that are white. Everything else in the frame is pretty dark, except for the lights, obviously. But yeah, so watch for those kinds of things.
Moving on, thank you, Bungle 2012. This one from Adam Delaney.
I think this is a really excellent portrait. The child is framed very nicely between the two pieces of furniture, and there's just enough room above the top of his head and below the play cards that he's using, to know that it was very, meticulously planned photo. So I think the composition is excellent. I love the way that the light is hitting his face, and that it filters through the blinds in that room. I just think it's a really, really nice portrait. I wouldn't change anything.
I agree. Possibility of shooting it a little bit more wide open to soften the background, but really nice, and the exposure on the little boy's face is just perfect.
You know, I think he could have shot a little bit more wide open, but I also think that because he's framed so perfectly between those two things, that it's not really necessary. I think that those elements play well within this composition.
Okay, and using the nifty 50, very nice. Here's one from David. Is it my turn? I think it's my turn. A very slick car. And David, I think you super wide. Yes, you've been using this 10 to 20 lots. I've seen some of your shots here, and I think on Instagram as well. And it can work very well for cars. These kind of leading lines from the car, I think, are great. But I feel like it's almost a little too wide here in starting the front of this here. It looks just a little strange to me. But other than that, as far as the framing of the car, very, very good. These guys' headlights back here, though, just like my eyes keep coming back to that because they are very bright and
It's
they're
circular.
huge.
Yeah.
They're huge.
And it's like that triangle, it's a very distinct shape that our eyes can recognize easily.
Yeah, and that's kind of the same
Yeah.
up here as well. But I think it's pretty cool. There's even a few stars in the sky. We also have because we've got these basically blue headlights and very yellow. We get this kind of transition from yellow to blue here, which is a little distracting as well. So you want to think about the lighting you're setting up for, and or where you are parking the car, and the amount of what kind of lighting is going to be hitting it. Because we got yellow light on one side, blue on the other.
Here's what I might do. That actually, the yellow contrast with the blue isn't that terrible in my opinion. I think that if you were to put those high beams behind the car and just use it as a highlight or as like a hair light,
Yeah.
that might be better. And you might even, you can kind of see that the inside of the car is being highlighted a little bit. So you would have this kind of effect just around the features of the car.
Oh, rim light.
Yeah, rim light. So I would move a little bit more to the left if you're facing the car, and then try to put those lights behind the car.
That's a cool idea. Yep. Very nice. Thanks, David. All right, this one from Mark.
At first glance, it looks like the eyes are just a little bit soft and that the focus is on the zipper of this woman. Otherwise, I kind of like the pattern, the repetition of the lines in the background. I would have framed her maybe up here, I think, just to back, because this is just kind of an empty area, and this is also kind of dead space. So, we talk about negative space, and I think this negative space is actually constructive in the composition of an image, whereas dead space just kind of detracts from it. So I would have framed her, waist, like mid-waist up, and framed her back here. The light on her face is really, really pretty.
I was just going to say that.
It's very nice.
Yep.
Color balance is a little off. I would warm it up, especially around the shadow area. It's just a little bit blue and magenta, which is actually coming off of her jacket. But and then again, we have these, this triangle. Like, this is the only dark, and it's very subtle in this image, not as obvious as the other image, but it's still a little bit distracting.
But if you crop that in, wouldn't you then have another triangle?
Not if you start over here, like there's clear spots of light in, some of these columns.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. Michael Sereno, taken in handheld night scene mode. Now, well, it looks like it came out all right, but really most of those are crutches, those other funny modes, and they're not going to necessarily give you better results than you yourself setting the camera up in a certain way. But it looks like it shows intelligent things, 35 millimeters and a fast enough shutter speed. The ISO may have been a little bit higher than it needed to be, but I think it looks good. I'm going to channel Christina here and say that maybe the right-hand side of your horizon is a little bit higher than the left, but just a small amount. I really wish that person hadn't been holding a cell phone. Now, I don't know if you knew these couple or not, but this is another instance where, because that little bit of light there is distracting. If you had stepped to the left, and that light would have been blocked by his face probably, and then it would have seemed like a couple nicely enjoying the sunset and not a girl nicely enjoying the sunset while her significant other checks his Instagram. So the colors here, the sky is great. The water is amazing, but it almost feels a little too much. I don't know if you increase the saturation or not. I might back it down just a little bit, really just a little bit. But I love the silhouetting of the trees and just a few other lights out there that give you an idea of some civilization. So overall, very nice. Christine, anything to add?
Nope.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael. Sergey, how do you say that? Sergey.
Sergey?
Sergey.
So I really like this image for a couple of reasons. I like the minimalistic aspect of it. I like its simplicity. I love that you had the subject look up at the light source because there's really flattering light on his face. However, the light's really, really bright. So I might either try to tone it down in post-processing or just adjust my settings in camera to begin with and change it so that his face isn't as blown out as it seems to be. Or maybe it's just the angle that I'm looking at the screen, but his face looks a little bit blown out. I love the snowflakes, and other than that, I mean, I think this image is great. I think it might be a stronger image if the intersection between the top part of the image, that blue sort of stripe, wasn't at his head. It wasn't intersecting with his head. Maybe if it was intersecting with, you know, his chest, or maybe if it wasn't intersecting at all, you know, may have been a stronger image, but I don't think it's like that big a deal.
It's similar to the cropping, you know, either do it a lot so it seems deliberate or don't let a little bit happen.
Yeah. I mean, I really do think it sort of works with this image. I don't know, I just like this image a lot. But yeah, I mean, you know, my guess is that it might make the image look a little bit stronger. Mm-hmm. Oh, and you used a 135 f2. Cool.
Yep, that's a nifty lens. Well, only thing I'll add from looking at your metadata is once you're up around ISO 6400, you do lose some of that dynamic range, and that's why we may be getting a little bit of a hotter, you know, amount of light on the face.
Sure, but you know, he could still have underexposed a little bit.
Yep, yep, very nice. Thank you, Sergey. Sergey. Stephen. It's got this swan coming in from a landing, and he asks, there's some blown out areas. Is that a big problem? Great, I love a question that we can answer right here. So let's take him with the D5300 f8, 1/2000th of a second, ISO 400. Okay, so is it a problem that there's blown out areas? Now, I think they're probably right here and some up here on the wing, and I'm going to say that no, there really isn't. Sure, you could maybe have a little bit more feather texture in here, but by getting that bright enough, you know, the exposure in this area of the wings is just great. Really, overall, I think this is a strong image. Framed it very nicely. I don't know if you did. Oh, it's not edited. It's straight from the camera, so no cropping. Really nicely framed. The only thing I wish is that we got just a little bit of the reflection cut off down here, and we have a little bit of empty space up there. Now, that's giving you a hard time because this big bird just came in and splashed into a landing, so to frame that perfectly. But if you'd given yourself a little extra room, then you could crop in just a little bit. But other than that, I think this is fine, and it's completely fine that some of the white is bright enough. That's better than getting gray and having a gray bird to underexpose.
To underexpose?
Well, the camera, you know, is going to necessarily kind of want to underexpose. It's always trying to make everything medium gray.
Right.
And that, I think, is less desirable than having pure white, because that's what the swan is. And it's being lit directly by the sun.
So the assumption here is that there's not going to be any post-processing in the image, because if there is going to be post-processing, then my advice would be to underexpose so that there are no blown out areas, and then to bring up the image in post, preserving the highlights so that nothing is actually blown out. I think, in my opinion, and I think this is in traditional, or not traditional, but in photography, when you sort of learn the basics and you talk about what pure white should be, and I guess this one is sort of pure white, but if there's things that I would consider to be pure white and that are okay if they're overexposed and blown out are probably like big bright spots of light in the background, like the sky, or something coming from a window, or something like that. But I think the subject should be pretty evenly exposed. So I might underexpose on camera and then try to bring the highlights back up in post, unless you're not planning to do any post processing, in which case then, well, I think this was probably the best.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stephen. Christian Karen.
So this is my turn. I don't really have much to say about this image, other than it's a really nice image. It looks like beautiful scenery, and the composition's very nice. I love the fog and the colors, and the dynamic range is really nice. There's nothing blown out and nothing super underexposed. So yeah, that's my take on it.
I might suggest adding a little bit of contrast to kind of accentuate this foreground here. But really that's just coming up with something to say, because otherwise I think it's a fairly nice image and it's composed quite nicely. And this is a great example of a scenic landscape being taken without a wide angle lens. This was taken with a 35 on a crop sensor, which means it's actually up around 60 something, or 56, somewhere around there. Whatever 35 times 1.6 is, I can't remember off the top of my head. And so I think that's a great example to use. Actually looking over your metadata, you could have shot this a little bit higher than 3.5. You certainly had enough shutter speed, and 5.6, f7, f8, f7.1, f8, somewhere in that range may have given you just a little bit more clarity and sharpness back there, but the space in this image doesn't need that necessarily, so it came out just fine. Thank you, Christian. All right, we have Icarus X, taken with a 6D, 24-105, great combination. And we got some, I'm going to guess, reenactors here, probably for the Civil War. And this is a cool image, but it can also be used to illustrate one of the things that you got to watch out for, and that is intersecting elements. Similar to the first image that I talked about, this tree is growing right out of this gentleman's head. Sometimes you are constrained by all kinds of things and you can't frame it any other way, but I wonder if you shift it to the right a little bit more, and also this guy over here maybe is acting like he's not quite really into the rest of this group. So shift to the right, cut him out, and really kind of come in on these four gentlemen that are all really close and interacting together in such a way. But other than that, I think it's a nice image, and I don't have anything else to add.
I don't have anything else to add either.
Great. From Scott, Hugo. Actually, his full name is Hugert McGee Meister Nutt. Sunbathing.
I think this is a really sweet portrait of a dog. I would not have shot it in full sunlight. I don't know why. I feel like the catch lights in his eyes are they're
a little hot.
They're a little hot. Also, I might just, if there's anything I would do, I might just crop in a little bit, because this is all just kind of dead space. Other than that, it's nice. Dogs in focus. I was watching a workshop today on Creative Live about pet photography, and the photographer was shooting at f2.0, f1.4, and which is it's pretty ballsy aperture to shoot at when you're shooting pets, which can be really active and move really quickly. But the portraits that she got, because of the depth of field that she could, the narrow depth of field that she could use to kind of focus in on the eyes and the expression of the pet, it just made really, really, really great portraits. So while, you might want to use a aperture of 5.6, and it looks like the lens that you were working with didn't allow you to, open your aperture up anymore. You could have zoomed in, or you were at 300, all right?
Strike two.
Just kidding. So I just think getting a little bit more depth just creates a lot, more interesting, creative portrait. But, this is a nice portrait, just something to think about for next time.
As an alternative to what Christina's saying, this is good, but it is a little hot, and I'm getting a little chromatic aberration here, and it feels a little soft out here. 75 to 300 is your kind of budget zoom lens. Shooting it at 300 and f5.6 is a little taxing on that lens, meaning you're not going to get the best quality out of that. So I would actually suggest in this instance to go f7 and you're going to get a better quality image from a lens like that in this case. So, but hey, you shot this in manual, that's great. And that's probably what I would have tried first too, f5.6 and 300, but then thinking about this lens and your options for best quality, stop down a little bit and you might get a little bit better quality. Thank you, Scott. We got Home of the Ben. I think you're up. Oh no, I'm up first. This is cute. So first look, this makes me think that this is the first time this little person has got to see giraffes, which is a fun experience when you think about those crazy creatures. 70D, 40 millimeter, love that walk around. And your metadata looks great. Only thing, I feel like I repeat myself a lot about shift a little this way or shift a little that way, and it's always so easy to do as I'm sitting here in this chair. But shift just a little bit to the right and give this child just a little bit more room so that we can kind of frame them within the giraffe's. No, yeah. But it also looks like somebody else's arm is over there, so maybe otherwise. Other than that, I think this is nice. I like that you're right down on their level. A lot of times people are lazy and just point the camera down at little people, and getting down on their level gives a nicer perspective. So thank you, Home of the Ben. Anything to add, Christina?
Back to my usual thing that I say at every critique. The picture looks a little crooked to me. The right side's a little bit lower than the left, so I might just adjust that horizon line. But that's it.
Great, thanks. Now we got from Dennis, Alamere Falls. No tripod or ND filter. Ooh, that does make things tough.
Challenging.
Yeah. So 1/6 of a second with the 18 to 140, which is a stabilized lens.
So this is a cool image. I really love the composition and all of the elements. The green little bits of leaves and the water and then this negative space. Everything works together really well and is really well balanced. I think that the white balance is a little off. I would have warmed that up a little bit more. And then I don't know, I can't decide if this sun flare adds or takes away from the image. I can't quite decide. But, other than that, it also looks a little bit soft to me.
Yep.
But other than that, it's a nicely composed image. I like it a lot.
Yep. I think this is a spot to return to with an ND filter so that you don't have to shoot at f22, which is going to give you some diffraction softness and a tripod. Return here with an ND filter and a tripod.
Or come in at a different time of day.
But then you're not going to get the sun over there.
Well, I'm not sure the sun's really helping.
Yeah, I can't decide about that either. I think it's pretty cool shooting at f22. You get those serious sun rays like we used to all draw as little children. I think that's neat, and I actually didn't notice it right away, so I'm not going to call it distracting. So I think I like it there. And I think, for this being a handheld 1/6 at f22 image, I think you did a nice job, Dennis.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Jim FFPM. Is it my turn?
Yes.
My turn. You'd think we'd remember. Ford Falcon.
Remember.
So this is cool. This tail light to me is the subject, along kind of with this whole, that fake wood paneling. I think it had a name, I don't remember. So I would like to see that tail light a little brighter. So the shadows need to be brought up a little bit here. For this to be a little bit of a stronger image. And I also wish that there was just a little bit more, just the very front of the car is cut off. So again, that's that thing about choosing your framing carefully so that you either look very deliberate in your cropping of objects in it, or you give them a little bit of space so you're not cropping them. I think this is a nifty image.
So I think that I love the light, the tail light. I think the design on it is very, very cool, and the designs on the paneling around it's really very cool. But I think the way that it's framed makes it look not very interesting. Things are cut off. At awkward spots, like down here and up here and up here and over here and over here. And so it makes, a potentially very interesting feature of the car seem not that interesting to me. It's just kind of, my eye gravitates to the taillight because it's the biggest thing on the image that is bright red. But it's, I will say it's not my favorite image. I think maybe approach it from a different angle.
How about really cropping in and making that taillight the center focus? Or not the center of the image, but being clearly the subject.
I feel like that image would work symmetrically. Like if you can figure out some sort of way to frame it symmetrically, then I think it would work. In every which it doesn't have to be, maybe from like top to bottom, like this could be if you close in right here and you have enough of this side and that side to make it look very symmetrical. I think it might look a little bit better. Or just, back up a little and get more of the car. But yeah, that's just my opinion.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim of FPM. Jay Gibson's St. Mary's Church.
So I like this image. I think the colors in the sky are really cool. It looks to me like it was maybe underexposed and it's been brought up in post-processing. There's a lot of color noise in the image.
Yep.
I don't know if that's just the camera that was used or, a very high, no, the ISO seems to be 200, so, but you also shot it at f/22. So, I don't know.
That 200 has a question mark after it, so I think Jay is trying to remember.
Okay.
Also shot it with 3 graduated neutral density filters on.
Oh, that seems a little excessive.
Well, it depends on what time of day, but it does seem a little excessive. 10 millimeters f/22 ISO 200.
So I'm gonna make a guess as to what the situation was. So I think the sky may have been a little too bright, and the church looks like it was in shade. So the church was really, really underexposed, and possibly the sky also, except for these areas. So one thing that I think would make this image stronger is adjusting your
You call it lens correction?
some lens correction. So just adjust the vertical line so that they're not converging at the center.
I'm going to put out a Lightroom video a little later this week that shows that.
Okay. So I think a little distortion is okay. Too much distortion is distracting.
And that's something else you got to watch out for these really wide angle lenses.
Exactly. So, and then I just don't think that the neutral density filter here had really a very good purpose. So I'm gonna ask you, maybe leave a comment and tell us why you chose to use the neutral density filter, because it seems like you probably could have managed with your camera settings. It doesn't look like there's any sun on any part of this image. So so tell us why.
Yep.
But yeah, just fix the distortion, and then I think you'll be golden.
Yep. Yeah, I think the noise, well, the distortion, yeah, but I think the noise is also detracting from this image. I mean,
Yes.
it's a very noisy image.
Yeah.
To the point of that it's starting to get distracting, and I think that takes away some from what is otherwise a nice composition in a cool place. All right.
I think we have time for one more picture.
One more.
All right.
Chinatown Alley. Wonder how you say that first name. So, D5200, 18 to 55 lens. I wonder if you handheld 1/10 of a second, quite possibly f3.5.
Pretty good for handheld photo. Very sharp.
Who goes first? Is it my turn?
Yes.
Oh, my pause here is I'm trying to figure out what the subject is, and some of you might be saying, it's the alleys, dummy. Well, but we have just enough of this trash in here that it, again, this is cropped out. This trash is only partly there or missing part of it. I think that it confuses me. And I would like to either step down the alley a little bit and shoot this. Oops, hold on. And shoot this just a little bit longer focal length to kind of compress that alleyway. Or no, maybe you do want it wide. Whoopsie.
Excuse us.
Excuse us, got a call coming in. We'll just keep talking because this is our last
So
picture.
here's one thing that I think you guys should try. I think that when you have, going back to the Ford car photo and then this photo, which I think are really similar in terms of it can be a really interesting subject to photograph, but I think that you have to be really selective about what you use and frame and how you frame it in order to make an interesting image, because it's really, I mean, that goes for any photo, but I think in particular because these images are so busy, I think try looking for symmetry in pictures. Try to, instead of shooting at an angle, just stand dead in the center. Try to look for the simplest composition that you can possibly find, and try to make it symmetrical. Think Wes Anderson. There, or in the Grand Budapest Hotel. I haven't seen that movie, but I know there's a lot of symmetry in it. So the left and right sides have very similar elements to them, and the top or the bottom. So that let's call it a little homework assignment. Let's see who takes some photos that are have symmetrical elements, and then if you post them on the Flickr group, then maybe we will take priority over those images.
Yep. Where's the one on us?
And review them.
Yeah.
Kind of like this one.
Something like this one.
Right, exactly.
But it doesn't have to be reflection, but shows symmetry.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I think that's a great one to end on. Where do we go there? This one, this one, this one.
Yeah.
That one. There you go. Thank you so much to everybody who submitted. There are more you can see up here in the tab. I will be back. I'll see if I can convince Christina with cake and other goodies to come back and critique a few more this week. And I thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.